everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are doing a wrap-up. It has been a little while since we've done a wrap-up, so I'm actually going to be wrapping up May, June, and July, and this is actually not going to be that crazy, I guess, because it's 2 months technically. May and July. I did not read anything in June. I do still have it split up between the months just because that's how I usually do it, and it felt a little bit weird trying to like organize these all together, like from worst to best, that kind of thing. So we are going to go over all of the stats. I remembered why I did this. I have them all together. The only things I actually split up are the things that are per month. So I have like books and pages per month. I have the ratings that I'm going to like split out, but like all the other stats I actually have together. So that's what we're doing. We're going to do all the stats for May and July, and then we are going to jump into the actual reviews, but I do have it split between May and July. Hopefully that made sense. Let's jump into it. So for those reading stats for May, I read 4 books. This was when we were getting into the actual packing up of the entire house and getting into moving, because we actually moved like June 4th. That was like the day we flew, so like the end of May, like all of that leading up to that was ridiculously crazy. So I read 4 books in May, whereas I read 8 books in July. You will see quite a lot of the things that I read in July were like comics, graphic novel, that kind of stuff, manga. So not really novels necessarily, but getting back into reading. Moving into the pages read, for May I have 1,050, which is quite low for me, and in July is 1,739. My goal every month is to get around 2,000 pages, so obviously I did not quite hit that, but for the fact that I only hit barely 1,000 pages in May and did not read anything in June, I'm actually pretty happy with July. Moving into the hours listened, I read 11 hours worth of audiobook in May. Nothing in June, obviously, but also nothing in July. Because of the fact that we have moved and I am now with my kids 24/7, like it is still summer break, I do most of my audiobook reading when I was driving Presley to school. Now our school situation here is going to be different as well. We're going to be walking to school instead of driving, so we'll see how that goes. I'm also not necessarily driving as far most of the time for like errands or other things. Like we have driven a couple times to like the Tacoma area, once to the Seattle area, and those obviously take a little bit longer. But I think also because we're not used to those areas yet, we're using the GPS more and needing to focus more. So I have not been actually doing audiobooks as much. I just started one recently though, so I'm hoping to get back into that. But so yeah, audiobook listening compared to like how I've been doing every month for the whole year has been quite low. I think that was mostly all the things that were actually split up. So now all of the stats are going to be for both months combined. For the reading method, I did have 6 physical books, 3 audiobooks, and 3 ebooks. For the genre, I read 3 paranormal, 3 horror, 2 sci-fi, 2 fantasy, 1 romance, and 1 retelling. I think we can tell that I'm slowly getting into that like creepy autumn Halloween type of year, because yeah, horror and paranormal have been quite up there. Book format, 5 of them were graphic novels, 5 of them were novels, and 2 were manga. So yes, the graphic format has been a little bit more than just a novel. As for if it's indie or traditional, 3 books were indie published and 9 were traditionally published, which I do find is actually quite normal when I'm reading a lot of graphic novels, comics, or manga, because I do get some indie of those, but not a ton. Most of them are like traditionally published. How I got it. 5 of them were owned previous to this year, which is good. 3 were bought this year, so those were all from my owned TBR. 2 were library books, 1 was an ARC, and 1 I read off of Kindle Unlimited. Then we have the age category. 9 of them are adult titles, 2 are young adult, and 1 is middle grade. That's pretty normal for me. And then we're going to get into star rating. So again, this is the star rating for both months, but we will go into like May stuff versus July stuff. So for the star rating, I did have 1 DNF, 1 3-star, 2 3.5 stars, 2 4 stars, 3 4.5 stars, and 3 5-star reads. That is an average of 3.958 or 3.96. That is actually pretty good for me. So that is a higher average than for the whole year so far. So overall, not bad. I have noticed that I'm a little bit, I don't know if I want to say necessarily pickier coming out of the reading slump that I'm in, or if it's just things haven't quite hit as much, which is why I do have, you know, like some 4.5s and things like that. But yeah, that is all of the stats, and so we are going to then jump into the actual ratings for the months. We will start with May, which had 4 books. So let's jump into that. So my 1 DNF was in May, and that was for After the Forest by Kel Woods. This was actually a book that I picked for my book club. We found puppies. Oh, 1 for you, 1 for Presley. That's so nice. Thank you for sharing. It was like a Hansel and Gretel retelling, but it was like after what happened in the forest for Hansel and Gretel. They are more adults now. Gretel has this like book that she got from the witch's cottage, and it's like whispering in her ear some fantastical magical things. Like she has magical gingerbread, and I was very excited for this one. I ended up listening to it on audio in the car near the end of the school year for Presley, and it felt like it was taking forever. I think I got 51% into this one, feeling like nothing really happened. The writing style for it was really just not for me. It was very like overly poetic in a way that I just personally don't like. I don't want to say it was necessarily purple prose. Like I do think it was well written if you're really looking for the way things are written with that, but it was taking forever for the author to like actually say what was happening. The actual magical, fantastical elements really took a backseat, I guess, to the story. Like it wasn't in my face enough. Like I really wanted it to be more. There was more than just like the magical gingerbread, but I had barely got to that because I just really didn't care by then. And it was just one of those things where like it felt more historical, which is again not usually my thing. Like they were very into this war that they were fighting against the Swedes or something like that. I don't remember. This was in May, but it was very like drama filled that way versus like a fantastical book or a magical book or a fantasy, you know, like it wasn't leaning into that. And so the fact that it was taking forever, I didn't care about the characters, nothing was really happening in over half of the book. I just got to a point where I didn't want to read it. And then I did have the physical book of this. I did. My library loan of it expired because it was taking forever to read. And at that point, it is a new release technically, and so it was something where if I was going to get back on the wait list for it, it was going to take weeks. Now that I've moved, I technically have multiple library cards on my Libby app. I am actually now curious if I was going to try and pick up this book again. I'm not, but if I was going to. There's a 3-week wait at the Pierce County Library System, but it is still an 8-week wait at the Phoenix Digital Library, which is what I had previously. I want to say it was greater than 8 weeks before. It might have been around there, maybe like 10, but it was something that is still on hold for like weeks. So I just was like, you know what? I'm really not enjoying this. Like it was just something that I was trying to push through because of the fact that it was for my book club, and I am not somebody that is going to make anybody not DNF a book. Like I'm not going to make you push through a book for my book club, especially me even. So I decided to DNF this. I think mostly it was me. Like I'm sure there are some people that do absolutely love this, but it was really not my thing. Really not what I thought was going to happen when I went into it, and so yeah. But after that DNF, the next book that I read in May is actually a 4-star read, and that is going to be mostly Harmless by Douglas Adams. This is the 5th and final book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy. I did really enjoy this one, which is sort of surprising. I gave the first book in this series 4 stars. We've been talking about it all year. But then I gave like the second book a 2, maybe a 3. I gave the third one like a 3.5. I think the fourth one I gave a 3, maybe something like that, like a low 3. And then this one I did give a 4. So like in general, the middle books in this series were lower for me. They were a little bit more all over the place, didn't follow the same characters as much as I would have liked, didn't have a full through plot from book 1 to book 5. I will say I did like that book 5 seems to harken back to the first one more. There was a little bit more parallels between book 1 and book 5. I liked the introduction of Random. Was it Random? I think a new like teenage female character that Arthur Dent has, that he's sort of like the father of, and he has to like parent, but he's new to being a parent, and I sort of liked that addition of a new character. I like the fact that we did talk a little bit more about like what happened in book 1 with Earth and things like that. It was still one of those things where like I almost wish this was a duology. Book 1 and book 5 were so much better in my opinion, like more concise, more like put together, not as rambly as the middle parts. But one of the big things about book 5 is the fact that you need to know about something that happened, I think, in book 3. So there was that to it. I will say I enjoyed it a lot more than the middle books in the series, so I did give it a 4. This is one of those series that I don't know who I would necessarily recommend it to. I personally loved the movie, and that was part of the reason I wanted to read this. And book 1 is in the movie quite a bit, even though it's not exact. But then the movie also has other parts that are not in the book. So I'm just like, it's an interesting sort of way that they adapted things because they're not all like exact. And a lot of movie adaptations aren't. But there was a big chunk of stuff that happened in the movie that didn't happen in the book, and vice versa. But that is all to say, I liked book 5. There is a book 6 technically, but it's written by Owen Colfer. I am very curious about that one because I like Owen Colfer as an author. Like I like the Artemis Fowl series and some of the other stuff that he's done. I'm curious about that one. Then I had a 4.5, which is The Everstorms by Amanda Foody. This is the 3rd book, pretty sure, in the Wildlore series. I've been reading this all year as well. I really have been enjoying this one. This is one that I almost read in my like BookTube's best books that I did back in February. This was Ashley from Realm of Comics. This was like her recommendation for one of her best middle grade books, the first one of the series. Wow, that's awesome. This one's awesome. It was the first one of the series, and that's why I started reading it. It wasn't in the vlog because I was on hold from my library, but I have really been loving these books. The first one I gave a 4 because it really introduced the magical world, but like I wanted a little bit more from it. Like it was really good, it just needed a little bit more. Book 2 I gave a 5-star. I absolutely love that one. I love the new characters and like the friendship progression and like the found family aspects, and I liked the mystery that was really in it because they all have a mystery. So book 3 I gave a 4.5 because I didn't like it as much as book 2. I found it to not be as good in the friendship aspects. Like we still had some of those same characters, but we were a little bit removed from them, and I just wished we had sort of progressed those a little bit more. But I did like the mystery aspect that they had in here because every single one has some sort of like something is happening with these magical creatures in this world, like the really big mystical magical creatures, and we have to sort of figure out what's going on with them. And so I liked the mystery that was in here. I just didn't feel like it was as well put together as the second one, but I did still really like the main character and like his friends and like the world in general. It was better than the first one, not quite as good as the second, so I did give it a 4.5. But this is a really, really fun middle grade. I've been listening to them on audiobook, and I will say also the audiobook narrator is an older man, obviously, and it took a little bit of getting used to because of the fact that like our main character in the first book is like 12 or something like that. Each book does have a little bit of like a time jump in between, so he is older now, but I was just like, At first it was a little bit hard to get used to, but I'm used to it now. I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm in the middle of the 4th book, which also I was listening to an audiobook from my library. However, it is the new one for this year, and so obviously my hold went out around the time that we moved. I did not get to finish it, and I'm still weeks out from that one. So I did pick up a hard copy at my library to read, so I'm hoping to get more into this one. We'll see how it is physically since I've been listening to them on audiobook, but I'm very, very excited. And then the last book that I read in May was a 5-star read, which is Mimi's Tales of Terror by Junji Ito, but the original story is by Hirokatsu Kihara and Ichiro Nakayama. This one is a manga, short stories that are like based on sort of like true tales is what they are sort of going for, and they all revolve around this girl named Mimi. So she's like the main protagonist going through this story. Yeah, university student Mimi and her boyfriend Naoto encounter one chilling mystery after another. There's the enigmatic neighbor woman dressed in black from head to toe, but if she's so odd, why does it seem like there are many others like her? Then, whose eyes track Mimi's movements from the cemetery next door? And why does a bizarre red circle drawn on a basement wall change with each passing day? 9 scary stories that really happened, drawn from the famed collection of urban legends, Shin Mimi Buruko, called New Earmuffs, and adapted into manga by horror genius Junji Ito. So, they're named, the main character's named Mimi because of the fact that the Japanese for these stories is Shin Mimi Buruko, and I really liked the fact that they took these stories and because they are like the true tales sort of thing, they do sometimes have these open-ended endings. Like, they don't necessarily get you the full explanation of why stuff happened, but I think the combination with the art style of Junji Ito's manga made everything really creepy. Like, I really liked that, and so as a collection of short stories, I gave it a 5. Like, I just really enjoyed my time with it. I thought the creep factor with them was quite high, and I liked the idea of these being true tales, even though, you know, it's sort of like the creepypastas and stuff. Like, you never quite know. I really liked this one.
Yeah?
Yeah, I liked that one. Okay, so now we're gonna jump into July, which I did have 8 books. The first one is a 3-star, so I didn't have any DNFs, which is great. I have the Boston Metaphysical Society by Madeline Holly Rosing. This one is an indie book, indie comic, that I did pick up at a Phoenix Comic-Con years ago. I haven't been since like 2019. I don't remember if this was 2019 or 2018. I gave this a 3-star. I had very high expectations of this, mostly just in the fact of the concept. We have like ghosts and paranormal investigators, and there is this Boston Metaphysical Society who's like checking those kind of things out, and it's very intriguing because some of the side characters I don't 100% know about, like the main characters. They're people from history. We have like Alexander Graham Bell and Nikola Tesla and Harry Houdini and things like that. Like, I really, really enjoyed the idea of these historical figures being scientists or like magicians and things like that, but then actually doing ghost hunting and things. And it didn't quite live up to that. I think part of it is that all of the people that are like the scientists, so we actually had Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, and Harry Houdini. They're in an organization called Beth, so Bell, Edison, Tesla, Houdini. They were very like one note, and I don't know if it was because we were supposed to know who they are or if it was just a gimmick sort of thing for this. I was hoping for a little bit more, especially when it came into like the actual like what was happening in this story. Then we also do have main characters, Samuel Hunter, Caitlin O'Sullivan, and Granville Woods, who actually is another real-life scientist who, like, they mention a little bit that I guess, like, Alexander Graham Bell stole the telephone from him or something. So again, we had some history things in here, and I just really wish that, like, we had more from the characters. The art style is pretty good, and I wished we just had a little bit more from it. Like, I wanted more from the paranormal element as well, because we just never really got a full explanation on how the paranormal and the science sort of build up together. It does also look like this is potentially like a spin-off of a novel that this author wrote as well. So I don't know if maybe I was just missing something, but for something that is supposed to be like a here, this is the entire collection of the Boston Metaphysical Society comics, I was just wanting more from the story. Like I really, really wanted more from it. Like it's not necessarily bad. I had some things that I was like, I wished we would have gotten into more characterization, especially the people that we should know from history. Like it just sounded so cool. I wanted more. Moving into the 3.5s, I do have Stitches. This is again art by Junji Ito, but it is short stories by Hirokatsu Kihara, who is also the original story creator of Mimi's Tales of Terror. So now, this one is in the manga section. I mean, Junji Ito, all that kind of stuff. It is actually like short stories, words on a page, with some illustrations. The thing about this one is, I think it's played up again as supposed to be like True Tales. It never actually says that in here, but they're very like, person A went to school and on their way there they saw this thing, and then when they tried to check out what it wasn't there anymore. Like that's it. Like it was very like, somebody told me this about person B, and so I was really wanting more. Like the short stories are quite short in here. The art does help. I really did like the art from it, but like story 1 is like from page 9 to page 16. Story 2 is page 17 to page 24. Like they're not very long, and we don't really get to know much about them, because like one of them was like, oh, there's this face, and then they put, you know, symbols on her because this is part of like the religion or whatever, and then they're gone. Like no explanation, no real creep factor, some potentially ghosty things. So this was just one of those ones that, especially since I read it after I read Mimi's Tales of Terror, which is basically by the same people, I was just hoping for more. I think it was Mimi's Tales of Terror was purely manga, whereas this is the short story with some illustrations, and I think the actual format of the manga, where you have everything being told to you with these like really creepy illustrations, was better, because the stories didn't have to necessarily be well written in a manga, or they could be a little bit vague because you're having this more like creep factor in those images. So I do think that one was way better for me. This does have one manga in the back, one story by Junji Ito, and it does say it is a bonus manga story by Junji Ito. So like you read it this way from left to right, and then you flip it from right to left for the manga story, and I do think this one was better. I liked it more as a manga. So in general, I don't think this was necessarily bad. I like the illustrations. I like having the Junji Ito story in it, but if you're gonna have to pick one, because they are art by Junji Ito, story by Hirokatsu Kihara, pick Mimi's Tales of Terror. Then my other 3.5 is Minimum Wage Magic by Rachel Aaron. I did also pick this for my book club, and I teetered between a 3.5 and a 4, but it would have been a low 4 because I did have some issues with it personally. This is supposed to be more adult. Like, she's like 26 in this story, guys. She felt very young adult. And I don't think it was necessarily like, oh, she's been sheltered her whole life, but some of the writing and voice of her felt very teenage, on a mission to save the world sort of thing, like, you know, that kind of voice, instead of 20-something going into everything that's happening. I did like the urban fantasy aspect of this. I really do like urban fantasy, and I know some people don't, but it was fantasy for sure, urban fantasy, but it was also sci-fi, like dystopian. They're in the Detroit Free Zone, so it's like in a futuristic Earth, futuristic United States, where the DFZ actually is a god and stuff. So we had some of the like paranormal aspects. There was definite sci-fi aspects with like some of the technology that they had there as well, and the dystopian sort of feel, but it was also fantasy. So we had this like really big mix of the different genres that this was. And so I was just sort of wishing for a little bit more of the fantasy and the sci-fi. Like, I needed a little bit more, like, world building. And, like, technically, this is a sequel series to the Heartstriker series, which is also set in this world. But that was, like, 20 years before. This is, like, after. And so I don't know how much of that I would have needed. They're being loud over there. I don't know how much of that I would have actually needed to get the world building here, because there were some things that I was wishing for a little bit more. And then I think the only other thing that I was a little bit disappointed in is the fact that I did actually read this one off of Kindle Unlimited, but this book ends a couple times. Like, there was a couple, like, fake out endings here, like, oh, we finished the actual mystery aspect, it could have ended there, or oh, we finished this conflict resolution, we could have ended there. There were some questions that I definitely still had, and again, I feel like part of that was for the world building. This is the first book in a series, so I do think the author was trying to leave some things open-ended, but when that open-endedness is actually directly related to the mystery that was happening in this first book, I was wanting to know what that was. Like, one of our side characters apparently knows something and he wouldn't tell her, and I'm now mad that we don't get to know. But we had a couple different endings to this story. Like, it could have ended here, it could have ended there, but it actually ended at 84% into this story. So not only did we have some fake out endings, but I thought we had like 40 more minutes of this story based on how fast I was reading, and no, it ended at 84%, and instead we got multiple chapters of the next book in the series. And at that point I was like, really? That's padding your book out a little bit too much for me for Kindle Unlimited. I did stop at 84%. I did not want to. I'm not that person that reads sneak peeks. Sneak peeks don't do me any good. I finish at the book that I finished, and then if I like that one enough, I will get more. Like, even books that are like, oh, here's the book, and there's like a chapter in the back of the paperback because, like, you know, the new hardcover for the next one's gonna come out soon, so they put that chapter back there. I never read the chapters. I never read those chapters. So that kicked it down to that 3.5 for me as well. I had some issues with it. Like, I really had a fun time. Don't get me wrong. Like, I liked the idea of the mix of urban fantasy and sci-fi, and there was this magical mystery, and I liked our main character enough, even though she did feel a little bit too young. Like, she's supposed to be like 26. She felt 15, 16, you know what I mean? I really did like a lot of aspects to this, but part of the reason I did kick it down to that 3.5 is I got annoyed at how many false endings we had, and then the fact that it just cut me off at 84%. Yeah. Now we're gonna move into my 4-star read, which is going to be The Hunt, Chapter 1 by Lucid. So this is another indie comic. I have been following this author, illustrator for a while. I have read their AVA comics. I really do like them. They do a lot of male romance, boys love. I don't know exactly how they classify their stuff, but this one is related to paranormal stuff, ghost hunting and werewolves and things like that. I gave this a 4 because I am realizing, being demisexual and things like that, that every so often things just come on a little bit too hot and heavy for me, and this one is actually pretty tame in the fact that it is a slower burn. It looks like it's going to be like a friends to lovers sort of situation, because these two characters did know each other like back in middle school before our guy, who is like the werewolf sort of character, moved away, and now he's like back in town. They're in college. It is an adult situation, adult story. There's no like actual sex on page until the short bonus story in the back, and let me tell you though, it is graphic. It is one of those things where I personally wanted book 2, chapter 2, before we like get into that, because I do feel like the actual characterization and the friendship aspect and stuff is starting to really come in a good way, and that was something that I really liked about the AVA comics. It started off with a sort of like acquaintances to friends to lovers situation, so like it was a slower burn, and this one, while it is, I guess, slow in that way that they're not in a relationship yet, they haven't really done anything except for like a sex dream in the back. We have had some mention of like oh, I really want, you know, things. And I think part of it is because the werewolf situation. I do think sometimes wolves are not my thing, but I do still really want to read this one. It's a 4 because I was hoping for a little bit more plot progression, relationship progression before we like really got into like part 2 of this was like, oh, sexy stuff, but like not really. Like it's not really there unless you get to that short story in the back. I am liking this. I am liking the ghost hunting aspect. I really want to know more. There is some sort of like potentially witchy aspect as well. It does say it's 18 plus. Boys love. Like it's all in there. And I like the author's art style. Can I show you a page? I'm sure we have some stuff that's not like scandalous. I like the art style a lot. I usually do like their characters and things too, but it is 100% rated R, 18, you know what I mean. So I do want to continue in this series because once I get into the actual like, oh, characters are great and relationship is great, I don't mind about all the other sexy stuff, but yeah. Okay, now we're going to get into the 4.5 stars. The first one I have here is Bad Dreams in the Night by Adam Ellis. I read this one through my library. I do want to own a copy eventually because I do have like Super Chill by him and everything. I follow him. I support his Patreon. It's like $1 and you get like short stories and things, comics from this guy. Yay! And I really do like this one. It's a 4.5 because since I support his Patreon, some of these stories are ones that I've seen before. A couple of them are also ones that he's shared on his Instagram, but like they got revamped a little bit. They are creepy, 100%. I read this at like 10 p.m. at night. I should not have done that, but I did. And so there were some ones that really got me again. But on the other hand, these are short stories, and there were a few of them that I was wishing for a little bit more explanation. And so because of that, I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't like 5 stars. It was a 4.5. Like it was so good. I just was wishing for a little bit more. But again, this is another guy that I really do like his art style, and he has some like good humor, and some political pieces on Instagram and stuff like that. Like I really do like following him and seeing his art, and I liked the idea that he actually made this as sort of like an homage to like scary stories to tell in the dark, but in his comics. Like I really liked that sort of like 90s, early 2000s horror homage. Then my other 4.5 is The Ghostkeeper by Joanna Taylor. This is going to be a graphic novel. It is a young adult graphic novel. It is LGBTQ, and it is slightly heavy-handed, which is why it's a 4.5. Through a lot of my reading of this, I felt like I was only going to give it maybe a 4, and then it got me at the end. I teared up a little bit at this one. This is one that I read like right after doing my mid-year book freakout tag, and there was a question in there that was like, a book that made you cry, and I was like, I haven't really cried at any book. This is basically the one that I teared up at, and so is the closest that I have gotten to that. This is one that I also had an arc of, so I did read this through the NetGalley app, I want to say, and they were billing it as an alchemical mix of horror, humor, drama, and romance, and it is a heartfelt meditation on mental health, grief, and loss. And I will say, like I said, it's a little bit heavy-handed, especially in that sort of mental health, grief, and loss. I know that this is young adult, but because they were sort of hammering it over our head about our main character, Dorian, basically putting everyone above himself because he's the only one in this area that can like speak to the ghosts and help them with their problems and help them move on. I just felt like there was so much of the like over and over again of him putting people first that it just got to a point where I was like, come on already, let's figure this out. So I really did like the way that this went. Like I said, I teared up, especially near the end. Like I really liked how some of this was. The art style was gorgeous. Again, I just sort of wish that it was pulled back just a little bit. And I know that could be that it's me. I'm 34, whereas this is intended more for a teen audience, a young adult audience. Maybe they did need a little bit more obviousness in this, but there was a little bit too much of that like even though he's supposed to be in a relationship and like trying to maybe not necessarily have a family, because he doesn't really have that around him, but like a support system and stuff like that, none of that was built up enough at the beginning to actually make us feel like that was a thing, so that was quickly glossed over and only was focused on what he was doing for these ghosts, whereas I would have wanted a little bit more development before we got into the problems we were having and then got to the end. The ending, again, everything clinched it for me. I did give it a 4.5. I really did enjoy this one. There was just certain parts of it that I felt were a little bit too like hitting me over the head with the message, and I would have liked that to be toned down a little. Okay, and then we're moving into my 5 stars. So the first one I have here is Saga, Volume 11 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I give pretty much all of these 5 stars. I have occasionally given some 4s for some of the like middle books in this series, but I've really been liking the direction that this has taken. This one ripped my heart out. Again, I feel like if you make me either really happy or really sad, it's a 5-star read, basically. I did really like this one. I can't get into this because it is literally volume 11, which is like, I don't even know if they tell me on here. It's like issues 55 through something, I'm pretty sure. But this is a series that is much beloved on BookTube. It is a sci-fi fantasy, actually, which I do personally love. Like, it's in space, it is sci-fi, but we have fantasy and magic and different races and things like that. It is sort of a Romeo and Juliet, different magic systems. People are going into war because of that. And this is about a family trying to survive. And I just really love everything here. A lot of the books have some sort of message in them, but they're done in a way that is not hitting you over the head with it. And I just personally love it. I love the art style. I don't even know if there's going to be anything I can really show you in here art style wise that's not going to be like a spoiler. I don't know, maybe some of this kind of stuff. Just like look at the art really quick and then we're done. I love this series so much, so I did give it 5 stars. And then my favorite book of July, probably actually my favorite book of both of these months combined, I read Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. Finally, I have the Illumicrate editions before they even like separated into Afterlight. I absolutely love this book. I read Chloe Brown forever ago. Presley's making stuff with blocks. Back when they were paperbacks, and then I got the hardcovers because I loved Chloe Brown. I love this one more. I have friends that told me I was gonna love this one more. I did. I love this one more. I love the fact that we did have the like fake dating aspect, which is one of my favorite things, but it was also friends to lovers, which is also one of my favorite things. Like, it was hitting some boxes for me. And one thing that I think was also just like really well done is the fact that like the main guy character, Zafir, is like top tier. I love the fact that he basically fell first before this book even started, and it was just so supportive of Dani the entire time. Like, everything was about like, I personally think this one thing, but I'm never gonna tell you to think this other way, especially because like she wants to go into this with the fake dating to help him out, but like not going in thinking of any sort of like relationship or feelings, mostly just sex. And truthfully, when I'm reading romances, I do not like the whole I only want a one-night stand or I only want to be physical first. Like, I don't like that coming first. And again, that is me as a demisexual. I know that is not going to be the case for everyone, but I liked the fact that we actually did have a really good build-up of the friendship aspect first. We did have feelings on his part. We had the hint of feelings on her part, even though she was still like, I only want a physical relationship. And I think the way that it was handled in here, it was very hot. Like, it was very well written, very steamy, very sexy, very like well put together. And I think it was partly because we really got to know these characters first. So for me, all of that added up to just be like the perfect thing. I did not want to put this down. I devoured this book, which is saying something because I pretty much only read 2 novels in the month of July. Everything else was comics, graphic novels, and manga, and I did not want to put this down. So yeah, kids and stuff. Okay, I need to be done pretty much talking to you guys, but I absolutely love this one. Somehow, some way, it knocked Chloe Brown off of like my favorite Talia Hibbert. I love this one. That's all I can say about it. And that is going to be it for today. I'm catching up on all the things that I feel like I'm behind on. So I hope you guys are enjoying it. If you do, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more videos. I do have videos coming out Tuesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes Saturdays. So I will see you then. Bye.